to the Guest Life Podcast, episode 39. We're so fortunate to have Rob in the studio today. I've known Rob probably 8 years now. We worked together just before I went on my own in business. So, we stayed in touch, stayed friends, seeing each other's journeys from a little bit further past. So it's Rob Rampado. He's the Senior Site Superintendent at Ingenuity Development. And we're so happy to have you, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.
Like I said, 7 years, man. You've done quite success here, man. It's been unbelievable. So kudos to you, man.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So we're going to hear about Rob's journey today. Again, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We're always talking about, leaders, young leaders. It was funny. I was telling a story about Rob today and I was just like, man, I don't know how old he is. I think he's pretty young. And then I was like, wait a minute. I was like, 8 years ago, we were working together. He must have been really young running that job site.
Yeah. 35. So I was 27, 28 when I was doing that project.
So we're going to talk about a little bit of his journey, how he got started and what he's got in store for his future. But, the big thing is getting like-minded people like Rob, picking their brain, really finding out, what got you to where you are today, and what keeps you motivated along this journey.
Yeah. So just basically to get started, I never had aspirations of being in the construction industry. I actually grew up in a family that owned an insurance company. So growing up, I wanted to work for my dad, take over the business with my sister and whatnot. And it's just so happened that a summer job turned into a full-time career. So what was happening was my old man had bought properties and he was trying to get into some development just as a side gig. And the one summer I said to him, listen, Pop, I want to just work a summer job. I don't want to work for you this summer. Can you get me a job with the GC at the time? And he said, sure, no problem. As soon as I stepped foot onto the job, it was a natural instinct. I knew that this is where I wanted to be. And during this summer job, my old man was starting to do these classes at night with his staff, to teach them different commercial insurance and whatnot. And he's like, come to the classes after work. And, you're obviously going to come to the business. So let's see what interests you or not. So I go to these classes. And I did not want to be there. I wanted to be back on site, getting, boots on the ground, getting dirty. And I just knew then, and I think my father knew at the time too, I could see how passionate he was, talking about his business and selling insurance. And that was him was a passion. And for me, my passion was I wanted to be back on site. And it actually was my old man 2 weeks before I was going back to school. He's like, listen, I don't think insurance is for you. He's
really?
He goes, I really
said it.
Yeah. He goes, I really think you need to, venture and out and into the construction world. I think you'll do a lot better. And he's like, I could tell you have a passion for it. And 2 weeks before school started, I switched my major from insurance into architecture. And then I never looked back. So I've been in the industry now 18 years.
Holy.
Been a superintendent now going on 13. And so it's been a wild ride. Like we talked about before this, I have now just over 200 million worth of work underneath my belt in the 13 years. In 2019, I achieved my gold seal certification, which was huge for me at the time because I was the youngest person at the company to get that. And it's really, really tough for anybody under 35 to get it because of, the experience, the amount of work that you have to have, the courses you have to take. So it's a lot more difficult than getting a diploma.
And talk us through that a little bit for anybody tuning in, the gold seal in project management or in site supervisor. Yes. How's that work?
So I got the gold seal in superintendent, which basically it's a nationally recognized certification, almost like if you were to say a business degree MBA is, it's recognized as your master's in business. This would be almost like a master's in construction.
Wow.
So it really focuses on your role in the industry and to achieve it, you have to have a minimum so many years in the industry, so many courses, training courses, so many credits. you have to have so many millions of dollars worth of work underneath your belt before you can even apply. Once you get all that, it took me about a few years to get it once I got started. Then you submit your application to your local construction association. They review it. They approve it. Then it goes nationally. Then nationally, they have to approve it. Then once that's approved, then you can write an exam to get it. So April 2019, I wrote the exam. I passed with flying colors. And I mean, it was probably one of my greatest accomplishments because for me, that really was a huge goal of mine to get. And you'd be surprised, like that certification like opened a lot of doors for me in my career. Like a lot of people looked at me differently, especially at a young age. Like having gold seal certification is definitely not an easy thing to get. A lot of older superintendents or project managers have it, but back then they were able to be grandfathered into the certification. They didn't have to write no tests. They didn't have to take any courses or do any schooling or anything like that because they had 30 plus years in the business. At that time, 3 years ago, I was only like maybe 9 years into the business as a superintendent. So it was very, very rare for somebody my age to get it. So it's been a wild ride since then. Working on a big project right now, $50 million retirement home, which is set to be completed towards the end of this year. So over the course of the 13 years, I look back and I'm like, man, it's only been 13 years, but like what I've completed to now it's been crazy. It's been crazy.
Well, it's wild because, you always have those times of reflection. And for anybody in business or personal development, you're talking about sometimes if you look 5 years ahead and you go, oh man, 5 years from now, what could be? And you look 5 years back and you see what you've done in 5 year period. It's like, holy shit, I can get a lot done. So we always say like, when 5 years feels so far, take a minute and reflect 5 years back and say, wow.
Well, I never really thought about it until you asked me to speak on the podcast because I look back, I'm like, how many years have I been in the industry? I'm like, oh my God, 18 years. I'm going on 18 years, 13 years as a super. I'm like, man, I was like, the one thing that I never really did, but I started to now is celebrate my accomplishments along the way, right? Because I was always looking at what's the next thing, like what's the next goal, what's the next project, right? I was never looking at like, okay, man, I've completed all of this, I should be proud, but I was always chasing that next thing, right? Yeah. So it's even to see what the next 5 years brings, like it could be out of this world. So.
When you talk about those dad jokes, right? Everybody, in the car with their friends or family, and they're like, "Oh, I worked on that project, and I worked on that project, and I worked on that project." All joking aside, you talk about the impact that those projects has made on the communities and the people and the staff that work there. Like, some people call it home for. My mom worked at Macassa Lodge, which is a retirement home for 28 years or something like that.
Yeah. So. It's funny you bring that up. So that project that we worked on together in Stony Creek, and my sister, she lives in Stony Creek, and my two nieces are going to be going to that school that I built there. So it's kind of like a nice feeling that I built something that, my family is going to, enjoy or be part of, going forward, right? I'm not doing it just to do it for a paycheck. Like it's nice to see that my nieces are going to see what their uncle have built, right? So that it's nice. And it's nice driving by, seeing things that you've worked on over the years, because there's no greater satisfaction than taking something from a piece of paper and seeing it come to life, and how many 20, 30 years down the road, it's still going to be there, right? So, and
putting that energy into the product, right? Like understanding that it's not just about the now, it's not just about getting the job done, it's not just about the price.
No.
It's about, really making an impact and having something that's going to last, the test of time within reason, right? Like, schools don't get renovated every 15 years.
No, like I look at every project as if it's my own, like my own dollars and cents going into it. Like, and I treat it as if, you're only as good as your last project. And the way I look at it is, I put my blood, sweat, and tears into it because I want the community to be proud of something that we're doing. And ultimately, I want to be proud of what we're doing as well. So when I'm doing a project, I take the owner's consideration as far as their money is concerned, and I try and take care of it. And that building is mine from, first shovel in the ground till I hand over that key. I treat it as if it's my own. So And I want the community to be involved as well. Like I try and involve, the neighbors as much as possible. I don't want any bad blood. I want everybody to be proud of what's happening. So I try to work well with everybody.
Yeah, it's a really good point when you talk about that. Like, even I remember it was near the Peach Festival where we were parking in that lot over there. And, having that relationship, I have a buddy of mine that owns a small contracting company. And he gives mailbox flyers. He goes, he's starting a job. He's going to be there for a couple months. He goes, each neighboring property and puts a mailbox flyer and just say, hey, if there's anything going on that you don't like, give us a call. And I think a lot of people don't love change, especially within their community, and especially when it disrupts their life flow. And I live down by Lock Street, and I remember the road was shut down a couple of years ago, and people were just bitching constantly. Yeah. And I went, "Do you remember driving or riding your bike down that road? It was horrible. I can't wait for it to be done."
Yeah.
The pain comes with
exactly. Like I get it. It's a little bit of suffering, but in the end, it will be something better to look at, right? It won't be an eyesore. So what the project that I'm working on, it used to be a previously abandoned hospital, and it just sat there and it was decrepit, and we tore it down, and now we're building a beautiful retirement home.
Amazing.
And it's going to bring up the value of everybody's home around the area.
Totally.
And just so, I get it. It's painful, but in the end, it'll be worth it. So.
Amazing. And, so talk a little bit about, obviously your journey, you got into site superintendents at 23?
23 years of age. Yeah.
How was it at 23?
Starting at when I was 18, when I got into the business, I was pretty lucky. I had worked with a few different companies, actually on some cool projects, actually, just as like a labor carpenter, lead hand. I worked on the Ferris wheel downtown Niagara Falls. I worked on the floating stage in Welland, Ontario for Illumina Aqua. If anybody's aware of that, they have musical talent that perform throughout the summer, and it floats on the water in the Welland Canal. So I've worked on a few of them, and then just so happens, as I'm working for this company, I ended up getting a contact that hooked me up with a company out of Guelph. Was I wouldn't say up and coming, but they were changing their direction as far as where they wanted to see their company go. They were starting to bring in a lot more young talent as the older guys were leaving, and so I ended up packing up. I moved to Burlington. I joined the company, and the owner there, I could not thank him enough. He gave me my first shot at being a superintendent. And he really entrusted a lot of us young guys to run these multi-million-dollar jobs. And his thought process was, I wanted to train these guys the way I want to build. And the only way to do that is start them out young, because, the saying goes, can't teach old dogs new tricks, right? So I got an opportunity at 23 years old, and I knew with this opportunity, I needed to do everything and anything to be successful at it. Yeah. So it meant I moved around the province. I made the sacrifice living out of a suitcase, traveling where the projects were. So I lived in Burlington. I lived in Guelph. I was in Kingston. I've traveled all over the province to work, and he gave me that opportunity, and I never said no to him. So wherever he wanted me to go, I went. And just so happened that, when Kingston was finished, things had transpired personally that I decided to make the move back home to Niagara Falls, and I decided to, seek out a different challenge, and I left there. But being that that gentleman gave me an opportunity, I will be forever indebted to him for that. Yeah. So I wouldn't be where I am today without him, because I could still be a laborer. You never know. But I knew that in order for me to be successful in what I wanted to do, I had to make those sacrifices. And a lot of people wouldn't have done that. Like, I have a lot of friends that probably wouldn't have packed up and moved around the province, but I knew this is what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. So I made that choice. So, and
talking about that journey, like, I find sometimes, my sister has a history degree from Worcester. awesome, super bright, way smarter than I ever was, especially when it comes to academics. But when she got on to university, it was like, well, I don't want to be a teacher. What am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And I bring that up, obviously, you know, Julie, if you're listening, I don't mind telling the story, but the big thing is about like people not knowing the direction or a good path to go.
Yeah.
And what I find sometimes is like in your construction industry, especially within the trades, people are like, oh, just do an apprenticeship. It's like, well, what is an apprenticeship?
Mm-hmm.
How does that work? Well, I think it's this and I think it's that.
Yeah.
It's okay. Well, how do you excel in it?
Yeah.
Right. Because, you know, I was very fortunate. Again, I had a mentor, you know, that got me started really young and gave me that opportunity.
Yeah.
And I find, you know, in your industry, when you're talking about getting your gold seal, was there a directional path where did you know about that, or it was just like, how do I be the best at this? And you did some self-discovery in that.
So actually, I only found out about Gold Seal when I started with that company. The superintendent, I was started as an assistant superintendent for a very short period of time. And I was working with a guy and I'm like, what is this Gold Seal? And so he really didn't explain it too well. So I started researching it.
Yeah.
But at the time I was like very new to the superintendent world. And so I started researching it and I was like, this is pretty cool. I'm like, not many people have it. I don't know the stat, but I think I'm one in like, I don't know, a few thousand that have it.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know. Don't quote me on that,
yeah,
but
yeah.
It's very, very, very minimal. So I didn't start pursuing my Gold Seal until 5 years in, because I needed 5 years to get it. But then as, you know, 5 years came, it became a lot more difficult to get. So it just took that much longer. But when I started researching it, that's when I was like, you know what, this is something I really should have. I mean, a lot of the people that were working on larger scale projects had a PEng or they had a university engineering degree. So they had that extra step on me. And I felt like I needed to, you know, excel and get something that was going to maybe get my foot in the door. And I felt like that was going to be the case. And so I pursued that because I wasn't going to go back to school to get my engineering. What the hell for? I mean, yeah, you know, wasn't going to design. I'm like, the only thing it's an analytical thinking and problem solving, which I already started doing. So I felt like I needed those letters next to my name in order to have that one step in the door.
Yeah.
So,
which is super important, right? When you're going paper to paper and someone doesn't know what you're doing or know your skill set, I find it's important to have, but at the same time, it's you know, showcasing and having that resume like we talked about is crucial. And in whatever you do, I find at that entry level, that barrier to entry is there, but kind of grinding, and it's like, how do you get experience without experience, right?
Yeah. The grind for me was like we talked about before, like I put in, you know, 12, 14-hour days, you know, Saturdays, you know, Sundays. I remember I was working on a project at McMaster University. I put in, I think it was like 24, 27 days straight in order to get occupancy on the first phase of the job. There was still 4 more phases after that. So like the grind, it's hard work. It's rewarding work, but it's hard work. As far as, you know, the experience aspect, how I had an advantage versus the generation before us was anytime that I would like be on a job site or I would hear people talk, like they would bring up some type of high-rise forming or whatever the case was. And actually a perfect example would be like I did a transfer station and they were talking about SCADA, and SCADA is all communications. I don't know anything about SCADA. So I'd go home, I'd Google, YouTube, like I'd spend my nights researching like what this terminology is, how it gets put together, how these things are built in sequence, so that when I sat in on meetings or I would talk to people that were older than me, that I could understand what they were talking about. Because a lot of the generation before us, they didn't have that advantage. They didn't have the Google and the YouTube, LinkedIn to see how things are being built. They had to do it through experience. So I was able to use that to my advantage. And for me, I found that things came to me very naturally, like when it came to forming or any type of structure work or mechanical. A quick little YouTube search or a Google search, I was able to figure it out. And then obviously when you take that and excel and actually, do the work, then you understand it, right? So
Totally.
that's how I got my experience, and then not to say I'm perfect. I made mistakes too. Everybody's going to make mistakes. You just got to limit them, right? Not try and make a massive mistake that's going to cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. That could be detrimental for sure.
And I'm sure at the scale that you guys are doing it, those are some of the mistakes.
It can be. Yeah, absolutely.
If you're not properly trained and know what you're doing.
There was one mistake that I wouldn't say I made, but it was definitely a decision that we made collectively as a company that really, really affected us and cost us, $40,000-$50,000. Now that was my second job as a superintendent. I tell you, since then I won't make that same mistake twice. That's for sure. So.
And, we were talking a little bit about health and safety and getting to the size and the scale that you guys are at. Yes. And with Ingenuity, you guys are doing some large scale projects, some medium sized scale projects. Mm-hmm. Talk about just how important health and safety is, because I don't think, if you guys if you're listening and you don't understand what that means, like the rigorous amount of work that needs to go into a daily operational business just to keep health and safety.
So as a superintendent, you are technically responsible for the health and safety of everybody on your project. Mm-hmm. The government has, since last time, has increased fines. I don't quote me on how much, but we're talking hundreds of thousands if somebody were to get critically injured or killed on the job, up to jail time. You are ultimately responsible for everybody's safety on the job. So the stress of that it can be very it can be hard on somebody for sure. So our health and safety is definitely number one on the project. If it affects schedule, if it affects budget, it is what it is. At the end of the day, we want to see everybody go home. It's not fun when somebody gets injured. Knock on wood, I have never had that situation. I hope to never have that situation. I'm sure everybody has seen on social media the other day where the guy was dangling from the tower crane in Toronto. Yeah. That situation, you might laugh at that, but that is scary, man. Like, I do not want to be that superintendent on that job, because the Ministry of Labor is going to be on you. How that happened? Why is that happening? Where's the safety documentation for your lifts? Where is the crane operator? We want to interview him. So I make sure that all my workers are properly trained. They're following health and safety protocol. My team or our team does the same. We make sure that everybody is properly orientated, that they understand the risks, the hazards, everything that comes with the job. I know some guys think they're superheroes and, they can work from high up, not get tied off, but there's zero tolerance for that with us. The deaths in construction are number one in the workforce, more than any other industry in the country. And there's a reason for that. It's people just, I guess they walk the line when it comes to the safety aspect. And I just don't want that happening on my job site, and neither does Ingenuity. We take this stuff very seriously. Everybody has a family. Everybody wants to go home at night, and you're there to earn a paycheck, right? Yeah. You're there to earn a living so you can provide for your family. There's no reason why you should not be able to go home at night, right? So if it takes a little bit longer to do something, that's what we're going to do. And if it takes a little bit longer to get the job done, then that's what's going to happen. Because, like I said, there's things more important than work. Right?
Yeah. So, and I think it's a huge eye opener for people to say, "Oh, why don't you just do that or just jump off of this?" Or, we joke around about it, but coming from different companies, the awareness is totally skewed.
Yes.
You know, across company basis and obviously multi different trades. It's like, you know, sometimes it's like a different world on another site. We see it all the time with different GCs.
Yeah. It could be just from site to site within the same company. It all depends on what your focus is.
Totally.
And my focus has always been health and safety. You know, I'll tell a little story here because it's my own story, but I was working on a project, same project that I had that $50,000 mistake. It was constant. MOL was showing up. It was a very, very difficult project to begin with. I was 24 years old. Like I was like greener than sod. So MOL kept showing up, issuing me orders to fix this, fix that. And it was difficult. Like I had no labor at the time. Like I was doing it all myself. And finally, you know, MOL came. We had a situation where, you know, the mason took down some guardrails to lift up some material onto the second floor, and they took out my guardrails, never put it back. Between the time of him taking down that guardrail and the time of me trying to be able to reinstate that guardrail, Ministry of Labor had shown up and they issued me a summons to court for a fine. And let me tell you something, as a superintendent standing in front of a judge and a lawyer and explaining to him why that guardrail wasn't up, it's not fun. It's not fun. So I had been fined, you know, $1,000, and I left that courtroom that day. And I admitted guilt. Yeah, like I just didn't have the time to get up there and reinstate it right away. Mm-hmm. I had called my boss and said, I don't care what's happening going forward. The main thing on this is the health and safety. I said, because it is not fun sitting in front of a judge and explaining to him why the safety on the job wasn't up to par.
Yeah.
So ever since that day, I made sure that was my number one priority. And if it affects other things, then it affects other things, and find somebody else. But since then, I tell that story all the time because people don't really understand. Like they see the fines, they see like, you know, the stories in the news, but until you actually, you know, experience it, it's different, right? It's an eye opener for sure.
Well, and just understanding what the repercussions are, right?
Absolutely. And that was just minimal. Nobody was hurt. Yeah. It was just like...
He just saw it.
The guy saw it and he was just done with being called. And now imagine if this was a critical injury or, you know, somebody had killed himself. It could be a lot worse. Totally. A lot worse. So...
when you're talking about, you know, working with daily operations, like, we were talking earlier, you got anywhere from 60 to 100 people on site.
Yep.
What's it like managing people for a positive outcome where you want guys and people on site, not just men, but people on site to, you know, be safe, but also push the envelope a little bit, create some good timelines, create some good communication, work together on site to, you know, to get that final goal?
So I find that in order to establish that is most of my legwork's done at the beginning of a project. Okay. So when I get a project, most of my thinking and planning starts at the beginning of the job, and it carries through. And the whole thing to get some type of a flow where everybody's on board and we're pushing the envelope is that everybody needs to buy into that plan. We talked about, you know, our project together on Stony Creek, and I bring this one up all the time. You know, started that job a month late due to permit issues or whatever the case was. We actually finished that job a month early, and it was all because everybody bought into the plan. You know, but your colleague that was there running the project in the beginning, I remember sitting down with him and say, okay, man, I need you to start your underground piping in this location. Yeah. I understand your outlet is at the front of the building. I said, but I need you to start over here. He goes, but Rob, I never do that. I always go from the outlet and work my way back up. I'm like, I get it, but I will make your company money if you just follow this plan. So I laid out the plan for him. I said, I need you to calculate your fall from this part of the building to the outlet. You already know the invert here. So just calculate it, what's the distance is. I said, then what we're going to do is I'm going to backfill everything nice. We'll lay the pipe in, we'll backfill on top. So we're not double digging everything. He's like, I'm like, I get it. You're going to have to do a little bit extra thinking right now. I said, but it'll be 100 times easier and faster, and you will thank me later. And he's like, okay, I believe it. Let's make it happen. And he did. We were painting that building. I remember beginning of December, and we started in August. So a 2-story, $14 million school, already had the roof on. We were painting. We were ready for finishes. In July, I was twiddling my thumbs. Like, what am I going to do with the rest of the summer? Because I was supposed to have this building done for September. Yeah. And I'm done a month and a half early, or a month early. So the biggest thing is everybody needs to buy into the plan. Now, it sounds great, but when there's somebody that doesn't actually follow the plan, that's when it becomes super difficult. And that's when I need to, look into my leadership, right? I need to dissect on how I'm delivering the plan. Like, is it something I'm doing wrong? Like, am I not giving the direction properly? And I look at it like, I'm sure you're familiar with Jocko Willink. Actually, I got his book over there. Yeah. So I look at it as like, is it me first? So I start dissecting me. Okay, am I not giving direction properly? Am I not giving the plans properly? So then what I do is I try and come up with a way of like, how can I simplify this so that they understand that it might seem weird the way we're doing it, but it makes sense because this, and this will fall into place. So I'll do my legwork and try and simplify it. If it gets to the point where they're still not following it, then I start to dissect on how they're running their team. Yeah. And what they're doing wrong, or if they're doing anything correct, or so I put my focus on them. And then I try to bring them back around so that they follow the plan. And 9 times out of 10, they end up falling back in line and things smoothing out. But, that portion there can be very, very difficult and taxing because my focus is taken off the project, but I start to focus more on that and still trying to do everything else at the same time. But in order for everything else to flow smoothly, I need to get that back in place. Totally. So that's when you have a job site of over 100 guys, 120, 130 guys like I have, it becomes organized chaos. But the main word is organized. Yeah. And that's in the beginning. That. In the beginning, that's where you make your initial steps. Mm-hmm. It might look like craziness, but everybody's flowing. And then when you sit in on your foreman's meetings, you're like, okay, well, you're going to pour wall W6, 7, 8 this day, and then you're going to strip, and then you're going to pour walls 9, 10, 11 over here, and then you're going to do this on Thursday. And everything flows. Everything's a day-to-day basis. So like, there is no downtime in a project. It's once you start, you're go all the time. Right.
I can imagine too, like especially the scale, right? Like you got crews that are there 100% of the time.
Absolutely. You got like at one time I had a tower crane going. We have these modular washrooms that we were putting in the building. I had a crane installing those. Then I had another crane putting exterior panels on. So you got 3 cranes going, you're pouring concrete, I'm flying this, I'm flying that, like, but it's all organized. It's like, well, I'm not pulling this out of my ass here, right? This is all properly organized, right? And that's how like a nice machine is flowing. But as soon as one of those gears, pops off and just starts deciding doing their own thing, that it becomes an issue, right? And then you got to try and get it back in line, right? Totally.
So, we're getting to the end of the podcast and we always ask this question. What advice would you give to the younger version of you or someone coming into the industry that's maybe, driven as much as you are?
I think, the biggest thing that I try and tell, the younger guys that want to get in this type of industry is make the sacrifices. I don't regret 1 minute for what I did, like, traveling, living out of a suitcase to have to, take advantage of the opportunities. And that's basically it. Take advantage of the opportunities that are given to you, because even if it's not the best paying job that you want, don't look at it as money. Money will always come. And my father used to say to me, find something that you love to do, then make money at it. Find what you're passionate about in the industry. If you're passionate about the carpentry aspect or plumbing aspect, take advantage of the opportunities, and then eventually the money will come, and you'll have the value to present to somebody to say, like, you know what? I feel that I have enough value, enough experience that I can ask for what I want now, right? Because I bring something to the table. Like, if you don't have that, you don't bring anything to the table yet. So take advantage of any opportunity that's given to you, make the sacrifices, and then excel on that, and really use that opportunity or those opportunities to advance your career. And I mean, in 13 years, all the opportunities I was given, I took advantage of. Like, they might have not been the best opportunities at the time, but for me, everything's a learning experience. And what I thought where I was going to be, today, 5 years ago, is not exactly where I wanted to be. But, I read this quote the other day that's, map out your life, but do it in pencil. Right. So for me, like, in 3 to 5 years, like, I have an idea of where I want to be, but an opportunity might come that could put me in a different direction or a different path that could take me somewhere where, could be a lot better for me. Right. And so obviously focus on the now, take advantage of the opportunities and make the sacrifices.
Yeah,
right?
I love it.
So.
Well, and guys, like, tuning in, thank you so much, Rob, for giving that insight and really understanding what the construction industry is like and the duration of time it takes to get there. It doesn't have to be that long, but to some people, 7, 8 years might feel like an eternity, especially when you're starting at the beginning. Oh my God, I can't believe that. Yeah. It goes by so much faster than you can imagine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, the projects, they might take forever, but here I am, 36 years old. By next year or in 2 years, I'm going to have over $250 million worth of work underneath my belt, and in such a short amount of time. So like, just take advantage of all your opportunities, man. Like, amazing. I try and tell my younger guys there too. I'm like, listen, you have a great opportunity, take advantage of it, because these don't come very often. So.
No, and they really don't. So, guys, that was the Guest Life Podcast, episode 39 with Rob Rampado. We just want to thank him again. We always say this quote, why not me? Why not now? And Rob's an exceptional example of what that means, and what can come from that with all the hard work and dedication and sacrifice over the time. Again, I'm very fortunate to know the story and see it firsthand, and also work alongside Rob in the trenches. So that's a big one. So guys, Rob's Instagram, his handle, Ingenuity, everything's going to be in the link in our bio, so you can check him out, check on Ingenuity, see some of the projects Rob's worked on. Rob, thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Man.